Hey everyone, how's it going? This is Azrin, the language nerd here, owner of the Calgary Language Nerds, and welcome to another YouTube video and, of course, podcast episode. Today we're finishing up our video series here and podcast series on the Gujarati alphabet. Okay, so if you haven't seen the previous episodes, feel free to go back in the previous podcast episodes or previous YouTube videos, and you're gonna see all of them. Okie dokie. So today the good news is we have relative smooth sailing ahead of us. We have a few medium difficulty letters. Nothing crazy hard. I can teach you how to say the letters that maybe you might struggle with relatively quickly, and you can get them in a relatively short period of time with some practice. And then we have a lot of very easy letters. So what you're seeing on the screen here for those watching the video is the letter the. Now, for native English speakers and, well, other languages too, you might not have the sound the. So, the good news is I can teach you how to say it pretty quickly. You're going to, let me stop my screen share. You're going to bite your tongue, literally bite your tongue like this. Video people, you have a slight advantage. Okay, so you see I'm biting my tongue. Just literally stick your tongue out and bite it. It feels strange. Don't hurt yourself, but bite your tongue gently. And then from that position, I want you to say a T sound. T, like, you know, the letter T in the alphabet, how in English it says like ta, 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 ta. Well, you're going to say that while you're biting your tongue. The, 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 the. So you bite your tongue and then you try and say a T. So the tip of your tongue, what it's really doing is it's touching the top two middle. It's basically resting against, well, there's two ways to view it actually. Um, One way to view it is the tip of your tongue is resting behind the top two middle teeth, and it's pronouncing a T using your teeth as a push-off point instead of using the roof of your mouth as a push-off point. Because in English, when we say the letter T, like top, tan, to, uh, uh, Tammy, Tom, that ta 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 sound, if you were to say that ta 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 sound on a loop, you'll notice the tip of your tongue is touching the roof of your mouth. In Gujarati, when we have the tha sound, tha is actually behind. You're pushing off the back of the top two middle teeth. That's technically what's happening. But essentially, if you just bite your tongue and then try and say a like tha, like a T sound, your mouth will have no choice but to say tha. Most important thing, bite your tongue. Okay, so bite your tongue. Da 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 da. Next, we have the aspirated variant of this letter. If you haven't seen the previous episodes on the Gujarati alphabet, please go watch them. I explain what aspiration is. So this is going to be ta. So now it's like you bite your tongue and you say the tha sound, but you kind of spit at the same time. You get that air puff, that puff of air out of your mouth. Ta. Lots of power in that sound. Ta, 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 ta. Next letter, if you can say tha and ta, you can say the next two letters. Now we have the, not aspirated, and da. Same concept as tha and ta, except instead you're going to bite your tongue. Let's go back here to this one. To say the, for example, you bite your tongue and you try to say the letter D, like a duh, like in the word dog or do or Dominic, that duh sound, except you're going to bite your tongue while you try and say it. And you're gonna launch off those teeth, the top teeth, as your top two middle teeth, as opposed to the roof of your mouth. So the unaspirated variant, you bite your tongue and the, almost like you're saying the cow, the person, almost like that. Like the word the, the in English, almost like that. And then we get the. This one's a bit trickier, but same concept. Bite your tongue, say a D like the, but then you're going to get lots of air pressure behind that. The. Remember, in a previous episode, I did walk you through the steps for getting aspiration and how do you aspirate a sound. Um, a very quick recap is basically you start by whispering and then you turn volume on halfway through the sound. So if you're saying something like Like I'll give an English example. Like you're saying the word Tom. What you do is you go ta 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 ta, almost like you're whispering. You say ta Tom ta Tom. I'm getting close to the microphone to try and help you hear it clearly, right? Ta right? So here we're gonna go a bit trickier because the voice sound, but you're going the ha the ha the ha, right? That's what you're doing. I explained that in more depth in a previous episode, if not mistaken. If you have any questions, you're welcome to contact me on Instagram, for example. It's Polyglot Azarin, P-L-O-Y, sorry, Polyglot, Polyglot AZ or ZREN, and you're more than welcome to message me. I'll be happy to give you more guidance. Okay, the next letters are really easy. Na, like the letter N in English. We're gonna go really fast through these. Na, pa, like the letter P in English. Like P as in like Peter Pan or palette or the only difference here is that this ba sound, some people say it sounds like a B. The difference in ba is that it's actually the letter P in when we have an S and a P together, like spot, span, uh Spartan, right? Spa, that spa sound. This is the Gujarati ba. It's ba without the S in front of it. Ba, 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 ba. Next one, very easy. Fa. This is the letter F. Fa, right? Like an F in English. Ba, ba, like the letter B in English. Very easy. Now we have an aspirated variant. Ba. So it's like a B with an H kind of combined with it. Same thing, you know, if you struggle with those aspirated sounds, please go watch the other videos in the alphabet where I do break down how to aspirate sounds in a more detailed fashion. And you should be able to, again, the key is just starting by saying ba, like a regular B, whispering, and then turning the volume on. So you go ba ha, ba ha, ba ha. That's how you practice that. Because when you say ba, all you're doing is you're just condensing that process down. You're just going ba, and you're just condensing it all together to get ba. Next letter is easy. Ma, like the word mom in English. Ya, like the letter Y, like yes, ya. Very straightforward letter. We're going to do this letter last. We're going to come back to this one. Okay. La, like the letter L in English, like the word love. Va, like vacuum cleaner. Now, it's important to know that the va in Gujarati is often pronounced a lot softer, but that's a very small distinction. It's a minor distinction. So sometimes it's not quite as strongly emphasized in Gujarati as it is in English, but essentially, va is essentially the same sound, essentially, just slightly softer, 3%, 10% softer. Now we have sha, literally the SH sound in English, like in the word shock or Sharon. Now here's a fun fact. We have another sha. Now these two shas were, once upon a time, they were pronounced, I believe, differently. In fact, I'm almost 100% sure they were probably pronounced differently at once upon a time. But nowadays, you can pronounce them identically, the same way, and you're going to be just fine. So this is another sha, just an SH sound, like shock or sham, right? As a fun fact, for these sha sounds, both of them, often you're going to hear Gujarati speakers pronounce them as a sa, as in like an S sound. S. The most common example of this would be the word for what. The word for what in Gujarati is shu. S-H-U, shu. I'll type it on the screen for those that are watching the video. Shu is typed like this, right? Looks like this. It's just sha with an u underneath and then the mindu on top, shu. But it is more, almost always, it is pronounced when people are speaking casually, even, well, yeah, when people are speaking day to day, let's say, it's going to be pronounced more like su. This is a typical S sound. So just something to be aware of, that both of these sh sounds often turn into a s when people are talking. Let's go to the next ones here. Now we actually have s. S is just a typical S, like an S in English, really straightforward to say. H. H is also very easy to say. It's like the letter H in English, right? H. If you're speaking, yeah, relatively straightforward. We already talked about ara. We talked about this letter in the previous video, so we don't need to talk about it today. Ksha. This one's a bit trickier, maybe, but not too bad. This is like saying this is just a K, an S, and an H together. Kind of like you said, uh I can't quite think of a great word off the top of my head, but it's just like ka, like the letter K, and then a sha. Almost like you said, if you said like it's almost like you said the word axe, like an axe murderer. Don't know why that came to mind, but an axe, like AX, like that axe sound, AXE, right? Axe, that xa sound, an axe. It's almost like that, but instead of saying axe, you're gonna get a axe, right? So it's a KSH as opposed to a KS, if that makes sense. Ksha, not a super common letter, which is nice. You don't see it every day. It's not used all the time, so not all that common and not crazy difficult to pronounce, I would say. This letter here is kind of like a G and an N together. It's like a gna, 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 gna. Some people, there are a couple of variants of how you might pronounce this, but let's just stick with the one I said today, kind of like a g and a na stuck together. This is another letter that you're almost never going to see. So you don't need to worry too much about this letter here. I don't remember if we didn't do one, if this letter showed up earlier, or perhaps it's not in this PDF that I'm using, but there is one last letter I'd like to introduce you to, which I'm going to type on the screen for those watching the for those watching on YouTube, or yes, watching the video. This is a tra. Tra is a bit trickier to say. This is a combination of you know what, actually, let's leave this one aside, because tra we can do when we do our half letters. Let's not worry about tra right now. We'll do that when we look at half letters, because Gujarati has, well, what are called half letters. So we'll look at that another day. Let's not worry about that today. We have one last letter which we skipped earlier. We're gonna come back to it, which is the letter ra. Ra is if you're a native English speaker, if that's your first language, this might be a tricky sound to say. The good news is I can teach you relatively quickly how to say it. So ra, we don't have this letter in English. Some people are scared off by this letter because, well, we don't have it in English, and they find it very difficult to roll their tongue in that sense. But I have very good news for you. Let me stop the screen share. Two pieces of good news. The first piece of good news is this letter is not exactly a rolled R. A rolled R sounds like this. So this is something you have, for example, in Spanish. Well, Gujarati, it's not exactly a rolled R. It's not exactly r. It's actually much easier than that. You just need to get one roll. You need one little tap of the tongue is all you need. You don't really need to get a nice strong Roberto, like in Spanish, the name, right? Or carro or perro in Spanish, these words, right? You don't get that really strong r in Gujarati, not really. It's a very relatively light sound. And the second piece of good news is we have this light sound in English all the time. In fact, in English, it this is going to twist your brain. In English, what ends up happening is it sounds something closer to a letter D. Sometimes it's written as a letter T. So I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to give you the my classic Spanish example, because I teach this letter more in Spanish than I do Gujarati. But I'll give you the Spanish example. Okay. Maybe I'll try to think of a Gujarati example over time. I don't have one as of right now, and I haven't been able to think of one. So the Spanish example I usually give is to say the words, to say the words get on they. Get as in G-E-T, like get up, right? Like that get on, like the word oh, and like if you're on a horse, right? And they as in they are here. like the plural they, like that THEY, get on they. Now, if you have a Canadian or American English and you say get on they, and you say it relatively quickly, don't Speedy Gonzales your way through it, but say it at a natural speed, get on they, get on they, get on they. What you end up saying is the Spanish word grande. When you say get on they, those English words, you end up saying the word in Spanish grande. Now, grande in Spanish has a letter R in it, the exact same R that Gujarati has, this ra sound. It's the exact same sound. So it's pretty crazy to think that in English, when we have those three words, get on day, put together, and we get on day, the letter T in the word get turns into this Gujarati ra sound, or the Spanish R for that matter as well. It magically turns into that ra sound. Pretty crazy, right? I'll give you another example. When we say the word, again, this presuming you have a Canadian or American accent, but if you say the word water, when we say water, for example, with that Canadian or American accent, water, that T in water, that water, 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 that is the Gujarati ra sound. So for those that maybe English isn't your first language, or maybe you have a different accent, for instance, when you're watching this, technically speaking, what you're doing with this ra is, there we go, is in very simple terms, you are saying the letter D in English, that da, da, da sound, like the word dog or door, but it's ever so light. It's a very light D. You're not saying, for example, the Gujarati word, well, even like Gujarati, the name of the language, right? You're not saying, I can't even do it. You're not saying Gujarati, Gujarati, but you're just saying you're attaching a very light D, Gujarati, Gujarati. Your tongue lightly flaps against the roof of your mouth. The tip of your tongue lightly flaps against the roof of your mouth, and you get that nice ra 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 sound. It would take some practice. I'll give you a few more English examples, and hopefully one of these English examples, regardless of what kind of accent you have or whatever it is, hopefully there's something here that that resonates with you, that helps you pronounce a sound. Well, one example you can also do is the word louder, like turn the music louder, turn the music up, turn the music louder. If you say louder and you pronounce that D in louder quite softly, you get that Gujarati ra as well. Louder, 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 exactly the same sound. Another example might be if you say a pot of tea, but you say it relatively quickly, a pot of tea, the T in pot turns into a Gujarati R. So that also might be something you can try, that you can try to say. Okay. Well, that wraps up the bulk of the that essentially wraps up the Gujarati alphabet. We will touch on at a later time the half letters and what that looks like, because those get a little bit tricky in Gujarati, and that definitely trips some people up. And so that's something that we'll touch on. I haven't decided yet if we're going to do that immediately and right off the bat we dive into the half letters and start to break those down, or if I want to touch on those at a later date. I haven't quite figured that out yet, but regardless, you've got 95%, 90% of the alphabet, maybe even more, down at this point. And we'll move forward in this Gujarati course. Have a wonderful rest of your day. It's quite late here in Taipei. I'm trying to talk a little bit quietly because I've got people sleeping in the apartment here, so I'm trying to keep it down. But yeah, see you guys later. Bye bye. Aujo.